So, welcome to Friends in Faith, and tonight we're starting a special series on the Eucharist. Now, the genesis of this series came from last summer, the summer of 2024, when 3 of our parishioners went to the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis and had a wonderful experience and came home and said, if there's a national Eucharistic revival, we need a Pasadena Eucharistic revival. You know, and in Indianapolis they had Mass and prayers and lots of activities, the highlight of which was the Eucharistic procession through the city. And so they thought, well, what we need here is the Eucharistic procession through Pasadena. And that'll be the culmination of this. But part of the entire revival is going to be these Friends in Faith videos with different pastors from Pasadena and a few neighboring churches. Bishop Cozzens, who was in Indianapolis, Bishop Brian, our regional bishop. We hope the Archbishop, Jose Gomez, we're still working on that, Mother Gloria from Alhambra, from the Carmelite Sisters, and so forth. And we'll all be doing videos about our experiences with the Eucharist. There will also be 40 hours devotion in all of the churches, and adoration, and so forth. But the culmination of this will be on May 17th, when there will be a Eucharistic procession between St. Philip and St. Andrew on Colorado Boulevard in the evening, more or less between 6 and 9 o'clock, I would say. And drawing attention to who we are and being proud to say we're Catholics in love with the Eucharist. That day, though, May 17th, will also kick off the procession that will take place starting in Indianapolis on the 18th and ending here in LA on the feast of Corpus Christi, June 22nd. So our own processions leading up to the national one that's going to be for 2025, that'll be here in LA. So I hope you enjoy these videos. They're not meant to be theological, but they are meant to express all of the different people, their faith in the Eucharist and their experience with being in love with Jesus in the real presence of the Eucharist. So, have a wonderful time. We're excited to be doing this for our church and for everybody. And I'll be glad to talk to you about it as we're going on. And the first video then will be today by Bishop Cozzens.
Hello, I'm Bishop Andrew Cozzens, Bishop of the Diocese of Crookston in northwest Minnesota. I'm more famous, though, for my work in leading the National Eucharistic Revival, the 3-year revival that the U.S. bishops have put on, as well as being chair of the National Eucharistic Congress. And delighted to speak with Friends in Faith about my own experience of Jesus in the Eucharist. You know, it all began for me when I was in the first grade. In the first grade, I got invited by my parish priest to make my first communion early. He found out he was retiring, and so he wanted me to be able to serve Mass for him before he left the parish. And so he invited me to make my first communion a year ahead of my classmates. And it was a profound experience for me. I had this deep, profound experience of Jesus' presence, and I really decided I wanted to be close to Jesus, and I began to love serving Mass. And of course, that over the years led to my own priestly vocation, which really was rooted in this desire to be able to be close to Jesus in the Eucharist. But you know, even when I began priestly ministry as a young priest, I saw the impact of the real presence on young people. And the way I remember experiencing it was this. I remember I was at a retreat for a bunch of our high school students in my parish, and we had adoration, and during adoration we had confessions. And I had finished hearing confessions, and I came back into the chapel where the young people were in adoration. And there was music playing. Some of them were singing. Most of them were kneeling. You can imagine the scene. But what I could see happening was the Lord was changing hearts. And I heard very clearly in my own heart the Lord say, all you have to do is bring them to me. You don't have to do anything else. Bring them to me, and I'll do the heavy lifting. And I really sensed that that was a kind of a key for all of our evangelization efforts, that really, if we expose people to Jesus and who he is, and especially his presence in the Blessed Sacrament and how he's always with us here as he promised he would be, that in fact when they encounter Jesus, it just changes them. And I believe this was one of the reasons why the bishops got so excited about our 3-year Eucharistic revival. It was because bishops understood that the Eucharist is kind of a key to evangelization. That when people come to experience, not just in their head but in their heart, that Jesus is really present in the Eucharist, and when they realize that they can encounter him and that he's alive here, that changes them, and it changes their relationship with Jesus, and it changes their relationship with the church. Someone who has encountered Jesus in the Eucharist is not going to be able to leave the church easily because they know he's real and they know he's really here. And so in that way, the Eucharist is kind of a key to evangelization. And I think it's one of the things we saw actually with the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage and the National Eucharistic Congress. It was the power of all of us together proclaiming our faith in Jesus in the Eucharist. I'll never forget some of those days of the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis last summer, especially the big procession that we had on Saturday afternoon. To be there on the float with the Blessed Sacrament and to have 60 to 65,000 people lining the streets, and to see the tears on people's faces as we were going by, to see the love in their hearts, to see the power of Jesus touching people's lives, and actually the people expressing their deep love for him. I know that had an impact on everybody who was there. I know it had an impact on me and all the bishops and priests who were there. And I actually know it had an impact on our country. It was a moment when we as a Catholic Church in the United States were able to hold up Jesus. And Jesus himself said, "When I am lifted up, I will draw all people to myself." So it's really my prayer that every person will come to discover the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, and that they'll then look for ways to be able to lift him up in their own hearts, in their own lives, but so that other people can encounter him too. Because when people encounter the living Jesus present in the Eucharist, it makes all the difference. Yeah, so the Eucharistic revival started when the bishops discovered and really were faced with the facts of the fact that a high percentage of Catholics didn't understand the presence of Jesus in the Eucharist. And here we were, 50, 60 years after the Second Vatican Council, when the Second Vatican Council had said that the Eucharist is the source and summit of our life. And yet it seemed like maybe 60%, maybe 70% of Catholics didn't understand the power of the Eucharist. And so it was really a wake-up call, I think, for the bishops who decided we need to do something about that. And we need to really try to invite people to a deeper experience of the Eucharist. But the power of the revival was that we began to realize as we began it that the Holy Spirit was really at work, and that he's been renewing people's hearts all over the country, and that people actually are coming to a deeper experience of Jesus in the Eucharist, and then being willing to be able to share that with others. Your own Friends in Faith ministry is a great example of something like this. People encountering Jesus and wanting to be able to share that with others. And the Eucharistic revival has seen really this kind of fire begin to burn in parishes and small groups all over the country. And we saw a lot of that come together actually with the 10th National Eucharistic Congress. We didn't know when we had a big event like that if Catholics would really show up, and we certainly didn't know the impact of it. And I'll never forget Saturday night in the stadium. You can imagine the scene, 60,000 people. We bring out the Blessed Sacrament, and we're actually all in silence. You could hear a baby crying on the other side of Lucas Oil Stadium. It was that quiet. And I was so overwhelmed by the Lord's goodness of us being together in those days and the power of the Holy Spirit. And I was really had to find myself there repenting to God for not believing enough in his goodness, because I could see the impact that this was having on people, and it was a bigger impact than I actually expected. And I think most of the bishops were surprised actually by the depth of conversion, the depth of commitment that we saw in the people who attended, and the way we think that could affect our country. So we actually have a real hope that we'll continue to do Eucharistic Congresses in the future, because this way of coming together to celebrate the gift of the Eucharist was such a powerful experience for us. Of course, this last year of the Eucharistic Revival has been focused on what we call Walk with One. It's inviting every Catholic to think about another person whom they could walk with back to the Eucharist, and really to find ways to reach out to other people who for some reason are away from the Eucharist or maybe never knew about Christ and his church, and to find ways to befriend them and to slowly over time walk with them so that we might be like Jesus on the road to Emmaus and leading them to discover him present in the Eucharist. So the Eucharistic revival as a 3-year movement will come to an end this summer, but what we've seen is a movement that we think doesn't have an end, actually. And it's this movement of Eucharistic renewal in the church that we will see to continue, because we know that every generation needs to rediscover the power of Jesus in the Eucharist. And when they do that, it transforms them, and that, of course, is what transforms the world. Thank you, and God bless you.